Hello BookTube, welcome back to my 2025 library tour. In this episode, more classics, canonical, modern, and contemporary fiction, poetry, and drama. First up on this shelf is Everything is Illuminated by Jonathan Safran Foer. This is a novel that came out in the mid-2000s. It's about a young Jewish man who is likely Jonathan Safran Foer himself, going to Ukraine to research his family history and his budding friendship with a young man who becomes his tour guide and fixer. The novel also delves into some historical storylines as well. I tried to read the novel back in 2006 and did not get on with it at all. I think I bailed on it in 2 chapters. And a few years ago, I decided to add this novel for some odd reason to my 10 contemporary classics I must spell redeem project. Now I say for some reason because Jonathan Safran Foer's work is very loved or hated. And while I did make it a bit further into the novel on my Bell Redemption attempt, it wasn't that far. And I'm also not entirely happy with the edition I have. It had a bit of damage, but it was only like 99 cents, so I really shouldn't be complaining that much. The next 2 books are Slim Volumes of Poetry by Alice Freeman. The View from Saturn, which is the first collection of hers that I read. I was browsing a year or so ago the LSU's website, the LSU Press's website, looking for poetry. And this collection popped up and I was intrigued, and so I checked it out and decided that I wanted to add it to my collection, and quite happy that I did. I really enjoy this collection of poetry. I also have Blood Weather, a more recent collection of poetry. And on my next book haul, there will be more Alice Freeman, but for the moment I'm holding off on book hauls while those book hauls are part of the library tour. I'll explain in a bit when I do my manga haul. Also a good collection, by the way. Next up is Mythos by Stephen Fry. This is the first in a trilogy of Greek mythology retellings. It's been a long time since I read it, but I remember it quite fondly. This book primarily focuses on the stories of the gods, which is why this is the only one of the trilogy that I have in my collection. I'm a fan of Greek mythology, but I am far more interested in the stories of the gods than I am of the heroes or anything else. Back to poetry with A Portal by Tracy Fuad. This is out from the University of Chicago Press. Not a collection that I remember fondly, although interesting design. Next is The Foresight Saga by John Galsworthy. This is a omnibus edition that includes well, a number of the Foresight novels, there is no um, table of contents for the whole series. It's, I think, book by book. I read the first of the Foresight novels and remember it fondly, but it has been a very long time, and I have not actually gotten around to reading this. I really need to, probably. Next up is Soul Mountain by Gao Xingjiang, translated from the Chinese by Mabel Lee. So I picked not this exact copy. I mean, it's the same edition, but a different copy. Back when I was in high school, shortly after Gao won the Nobel Prize in Literature, and I tried to read it, and I wasn't all that successful. I bailed within maybe a chapter or two. And then a few years ago, I started getting a strong desire for Nobel Prize winners. Not only those that I have that would have been new to me, but also ones that I had read before or that I have some unfinished business with, namely for Bell Redemptions. And Soul Mountain was one of those books. So I readded it to my collection and had another go at it. And I did make progress. I got significantly further this time than I did the last time, about 100 pages or more in before I ran out of steam. So I still have unfinished business with Soul Mountain. Next is The Words That Remain by Steniel Gardel, translated by Bruna Dantes Lobato. This won the National Book Award for Translated Fiction in 2023. This is the story of a man who never learned to read. When he was younger, he fell in love with another young man, and they were brutally separated. But before that separation, the main character's boyfriend left him a letter. But it took him decades to finally get around to learning how to read it. I did not quite get on with this when I tried it a few months ago. Maybe a Bell Redemption is in order. Back to poetry with two collections by Matthew Gilman. First up is Night Logic, which is published by Tupelo Press, which was distributed by the University of Chicago Press, if I'm not mistaken. Nice collection. Really enjoyed it. Although many of the poems in this collection are in his more recent collection, Before Light, which is put out by BOA Editions, which is also a really good collection of collection. I really like this one too. Back to translated fiction with Our Lady of the Flowers by Jean Genet, translated by Bernard Frenchman. Now, this is a classic of 20th century French literature that I've been meaning to get to for quite a while. I've had this book for about 10 years now, and I need to get to it. So the next batch of books are poetry collections. First up is Selected Poems 1947 to 1995 by Allen Ginsberg. Allen Ginsberg was a great American poet of the mid 20th century. He was instrumental in the Beat Generation, and I have quite a bit of unfinished business with him. I had a different form of this collection decades ago, and never quite got on with it. So I really need to revisit Allen Ginsberg and have it out with him. Yeah. Next up is Adala Paula by Melissa Ginsberg. This is a really good collection of poetry put out by LSU Press, which I picked up in 2023 during my poetry haul from LSU Press. I also have the collected poetry of Nikki Giovanni, 1968 to 1998. Hopefully, this will eventually be the collected poetry of Nikki Giovanni, Part 1. And there will be a second collected edition soon. So, Nikki Giovanni was a great American poet working in the mid and later 20th century and into the 21st century. She died about a month or so ago. And I think I'm overdue for a reread. I read this collection 2 years ago, and I do have mixed feelings for it. There are some poems that I really like and some that left me a bit cold, but I'm thinking about giving this a reread sometime this year. Next is Poems 1962 to 2012 by Louise Gluck. She won the Nobel Prize in Literature about a decade or so ago for her poetry, and this is a really good collection. I really enjoyed reading this every time I've read it, and I've read it about twice now. Nice collection. The next batch of books are by Nadine Gordimer. First up is Burger's Daughter. This is a story of a young woman who is the daughter of South African opposition figures who is trying to live her life and with and without her, like within her father's shadow, and trying to find her own way and her story. This novel has been bugging me since 2017 when I tried to read it for several times, and I think I need to give it another go. I also have My Son's Story, which is about, I think he's an academic who ultimately leaves his family for his lover and all that entails. It's been a while since I had to go at this, and I don't remember it all that fondly. Nadine Gordimer is very much an author that I'm on uncertain ground with. Next is We So Seldom Look on Love by Barbara Gowdy. This is a short story collection that I first had about 20 years ago and decided I wanted to re-add it to my collection a few years ago. Not entirely sure why. I think maybe I want to give it another look after about 20 years to see if what my feelings are separated by time. Because I don't think I particularly liked many of the stories in this collection. So anyway. Next is The River Twice by Kathleen Graeber. This is a collection out from the Princeton Series of Contemporary Poets from Princeton University Press. Not fond of this collection. The Dream of the Unified Field, Selected Poems 1974 to 1994 by Jory Graham, winner of the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry. So this is a really good collection. It's one of my favorites. It's been a while since I read it. I had a copy of this back in the early 2000s and got rid of it, and a few years ago re-added it to my collection, and quite happy that I did. Would like to read more of Jory Graham. Speaking of reacquisitions, next up is The Rut by Günter Grass, translated by Ralph Manheim. So this is a very weird novel about a film producer who is trying to make a retelling of various fairy tales and how those fairy tales take on a life of their own over the course of the novel. He's also having a recurring dream in which he's the last human in the world orbiting Earth in a spacecraft, while rats have become sentient and have developed their own civilization, and that the rat that he received as a Christmas present has become something of a teacher and is broadcasting messages, giving comfort to our main character as he's orbiting the Earth. And also, there's a research vessel piloted by a group of women. Eventually, I think everything comes together, but it's been a long time since I fully read the novel. I had an edition of this book back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I remember having read it in high school and finishing it, but I got rid of it many years ago, and like I said with Soul Mountain, I had a strong desire 2-3 years ago to reacquire a number of Nobel Prize works that I'd had in my collection, whether I had read them successfully or not, and also others new to me. And I did do that, and I still kind of have the bug for it. But when I, over the last 2 Decembers, when I've come back to reread this novel, it hasn't worked out, which is frustrating, and I really want to try to have it out with this novel again. We shall see. Just maybe not in December. Next is The Greek Myths by Robert Graves. This is a collection of Greek mythology told through the lens of Robert Graves' idiosyncratic interpretations of Greek mythology, which can be interesting, although it is very influenced by certain psychoanalytic theories and late 19th century hypotheses about ancient religions, which may or may not hold water, which I doubt hold water anymore, actually. The next 2 books are by Jim Grimsley. First up is Dream Boy, which came out in the 90s. It's about a group of 2 young men who fall in love and how their relationship progresses. I read it when I was in high school. found it very moving, but I haven't come back to it since. And I'm feeling the need, or thought that maybe I ought to come back to it. I also have a more recent book by his, Boulevard, which came out in the early 2000s. I picked up this copy from Book People shortly after it became a paperback, and it took me about 20 years before I finally got around to reading it. It's set in New Orleans about a young man who basically is coming to the big city to experience the life in the big city for a young gay man. I have mixed feelings for it. I think I need to revisit it. When? I don't know. Next up is The Recent East by Thomas Grattan. This came out about 2 years ago. It's about a family of German expatriates who, with the fall of the Berlin Wall, decide to return to Germany. Have not gotten around to it yet. Sticking with Germany, this is Porcelain, Poem on the Downfall of My City by Durs Grünbein, translated by Karen Leader. So this is a collection of poems that look at Dresden. It's an okay collection. It took me a bit to get into it, but I'm glad I read it. It's out from Seagull, which is distributed here in the U.S. by the University of Chicago Press. Next is The 11th Sun by Gulong, translated from the Chinese by Rebecca S. Tsai. It's published by Homa and Seiki Books. So this is a martial arts novel about a young man who I think is on the wrong side of the law, who has an adventure. It's been a long time since I've read it. I'm not entirely sure if this novel should be here or with my science fiction and fantasy collection. But I remember it quite fondly, although I haven't read it in quite a while. The Man with Night Sweats by Tom Gunn. So this is a poetry collection that I didn't quite get on with as well as I would have liked. I'm going to revisit it soon. So the next book is an old omnibus edition. It's the works of H. Rider Haggard. It came out in I think this edition's from the 20s. Yes, 1928. And it includes Cleopatra, She, which is one of the reasons why I picked this up, King Solomon's Mines, and Alan Quatermain. So when I was 14, I picked up from Dover an omnibus edition of She, King Solomon's Mines, and Alan Quatermain. And I eventually got rid of that edition, but I'd always wanted to reread those three novels, even though subsequent attempts to reread King Solomon's Mines has always ended in failure. So I eventually picked up this from Golden's because I could never find an edition, a copy. So I picked this up. Although now buying things online, I probably would have a lot more success. Next is finally a work of drama, A Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hainsberry. This is a classic of mid-century American theater. It's about a family who is being bought out of their home, um, and all that entails. It's been a long time since I've read it, and I'm thinking I'm probably going to read it in February. Angelia Read and Reread has Raisin in the Sun slated for her a year-long drama project, so I'll be joining in as well for that. The next three books are poetry collections. Two by Myron Hardy. First up is Radioactive Starlings, which is a really good collection. It's from the Princeton series of contemporary poets from Princeton University Press, and I quite like this collection. I also rather like the more recent Aurora Americana, also by Myron Hardy. And again, out from the Princeton University Press. And finally, the last book on this shelf is Time and Materials, selected poems 1997 to 2005 by Robert Hess, National Book Award winner, and also winner of the Pulitzer Prize. So this is a collection of selected poems that at times I really like and at times I have a harder time with, depending on my reading. So, yeah. So that was the third shelf or fourth shelf if you count the top of the bookcase as a shelf in its own right. So, anyway, BookTube, I will be back tomorrow with more books from this shelf and weekly reads. But before I sign off for today, I do have a manga haul, so look forward to that in a few minutes. So until then, BookTube, thank you, have a great afternoon, and stay safe.